Hi, and welcome back to ADK Taste, where we share the stories, people, and places that make the Adirondacks unforgettable. I'm Jane, your host, along with my brother Steve. Steve, say hi.
Hi, Steve.
And today we're saddling up for an adventure through time with one of America's most fascinating presidents, Theodore Roosevelt. Our guest, Joe Wiegand, doesn't just study Roosevelt, he becomes him. Known nationwide as the leading Teddy Roosevelt repriser, Joe brings the Rough Rider, reformer, and conservationist to life in a way that makes history feel fresh and electric. Joe is a big part of Newcomb, New York's Teddy Roosevelt Weekend in the Adirondacks, which takes place every September. He's based in Medora, North Dakota, and Joe works for the Theodore Roosevelt Medora Foundation and travels extensively throughout the U.S., portraying TR, including performing at the White House. Together, we're going to explore Roosevelt's deep connection to the Adirondacks, that fateful night ride to the presidency, and how his love of wild places still echoes through these mountains today. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you on ADK Talks.
Such a delight to be with you, Jane, your brother Steve, and with your listeners throughout the country and throughout the world.
I'm just curious, how did you first become Teddy Roosevelt?
One should know that I am the son of a hippie comedian and a hippie artist. My hippie comedian James Wiegand, was known on stage as Jimmy Wig and Jim Wiggins. He took the family from the suburbs of Chicago out to Hollywood, California. And he wrote for David Letterman and George Carlin and Chuck Barris. And when you're a teenager in Hollywood in the 1970s, late 70s, and your dad's a hippie comedian, the only way to be a rebellious teenager is to volunteer for Ronald Reagan. And I was sort of the Alex P. Keaton in the relationship. That I was often compared to that character on television. I went for American history and academics, and I was the first in my family, including two older brothers, to graduate high school. Got some great scholarships to attend a small liberal arts college, studied my political science. But ever since I was a tiny little boy, when I would finish my math early, my fourth grade teacher allowed me to go to the library while she caught others up. I ensconced myself with presidential biography and military history. And fast forward through life, when the 9/11 attacks occurred, I had been in the midst of a 15-year career in Illinois, Republican politics. I held a county commission office, had sought the state legislature, managed campaigns at the gubernatorial and presidential level in Illinois. And after those attacks, 36 years old, prayerful and thoughtful about how I might serve the country, but too fat and too old to join the military, my sister-in-law gifted me the Pulitzer Prize-winning biography of young Theodore Roosevelt called The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris.
Yes, great book.
Which includes TR's experiences, his youthful experiences in the Adirondacks and his midnight ride to the presidency from Mount Marcy through Taos and North Creek. And as I read that book, I was familiar with the example of Mark Twain being portrayed by Hal Holbrook. And my father was a great fan of Will Rogers and the actor James Whitmore, known as the king of the one-man show. Well, on Broadway, he had performed as Will Rogers, Harry Truman, Theodore Roosevelt in the play Bully. So I began to develop very slowly and incrementally. I tried to bring Theodore Roosevelt to life for audiences. And eventually, as you know, Edmund Morris, from that 1978 Pulitzer Prize winner, it would take him some 30 years before he published Theodore Rex and the Colonel, told the complete life story of Theodore Roosevelt in some 1,000 pages or more. And Theodore Roosevelt lived such a rich life, and he's given me a rich life these last 20 years as I transitioned out of political work in Illinois and into performing full-time as Theodore Roosevelt. It's just been an amazing adventure, and I'm blessed that every year I'm called back to the Adirondacks, at least on the annual commemoration of TR being in that region at the time of McKinley's passing. And additional times as well. I've just enjoyed playing from Plattsburgh, where there's a great history of Theodore Roosevelt and General Leonard Wood's preparedness camp, and Theodore Roosevelt writing in his first book, A Naval History of the War of 1812, that Captain McDonough and was the greatest captain in that war between the Revolution and the Civil War for the Battle of Plattsburgh, and General McComb. It's been a wonderful adventure bringing Teddy Roosevelt to life, and it has fulfilled that desire I had to be of some service to the country. I very often know that whether it's some of the young people that come out for Teddy Roosevelt Days in Newcomb, or if it's kids in the classroom in North Creek, that we're doing some good.
What is the difference, do you think, between playing Teddy Roosevelt and really inhabiting him?
Oh, that's interesting, because the relationship I've had with Theodore Roosevelt, as I mentioned before we came on the air, I had the pleasure of being with Doris Kearns Goodwin. And she famously in an interview said that when she was writing The Bully Pulpit, she was going to bed with Theodore Roosevelt every night and waking up with Theodore Roosevelt every morning. Well, there have been long stretches for me, because I got to the point where I was doing about 400 shows a year and on the road about 11 months a year. And, he inhabited me and I inhabited him. There's something about that fine line between acting and pretending and fantasy and the being of, to really decide, I am going to do my best to really welcome the spirit of Theodore Roosevelt and his life stories and his accomplishments, and try to share those in first person as Theodore Roosevelt. Of course, I realize even when I'm at my best, I'm just a fraction of what I think the original was. I'm so humbled and so gladly enthusiastic about the challenge of bringing Theodore Roosevelt to life for audiences.
Can you share, something you do to prepare, physically, spiritually, mentally?
Do you need to prepare, or does it just click on?
Ooh, I love Steve's insightful question. I come from a background of both political work and comedy. I learned stagecraft from watching my dad since I was the age of 10. Every performance is going to be new because of geography, the composition of the audience. I love bringing into it some acknowledgement of the locality, the region, the people of this region that Theodore Roosevelt would have known, the history that they might be a part of. So I stay open and I'm not scripted. No two performances are the like. Each one is a unique artistic creation for me. I've learned some things over the 20 years plus that I've been doing it, to relax, to breathe deeply, to kind of, take that moment of Zen or yoga or prayer before a performance, and hope that I'm up to the standards of the original. My dad had great advice as a performer. Let the audience see that you're having fun. So even if it's been planes, trains, and automobiles to get there, and even if I'm on 2 hours of sleep or 4 hours over the last 2 nights, you give them your best. And sometimes I found being Theodore Roosevelt and realizing what a pace he kept at life. Sometimes when I arrive and I'm performing on very little sleep and lots of coffee, sometimes some of the, I think, most brilliant and enjoyable work that I've done has been done when I've just got nothing in the gas tank.
Wow.
But you charge up Kettle Hill anyway.
Right. Okay, let's just get some basics covered. So for anyone whose last U.S. history class was a while ago, or maybe they skipped that class on Teddy Roosevelt.
Sure.
Just in your own sort of Cliff Notes version, who was Teddy Roosevelt, and why do you think he looms so large in our national story?
Surely. So interesting that a boy born near Gramercy Park in Manhattan, New York City, would become known as our first cowboy president and our first conservation president. His life story is fascinating. I would certainly recommend for your listeners the book by David McCullough, Mornings on Horseback, because, again, that is so much about the youthful, the young Teddy Roosevelt. Asthmatic as a little boy, so very sickly that his parents thought he might die, and then becomes this robust figure of manhood in the strenuous life, which is one of the phrases that he gave to us from his speeches and his advocacy for other citizens to live the strenuous life in the arena. There's so many times where Puck Magazine or others characterize him as the boxer, as the wrestler, as the soldier. It's all activity. May have lost point of so even here, the thumbnail sketch of Theodore Roosevelt, it's a huge thumbnail because he was just so much. He's a New York patrician. Mother, however, comes from Georgia. And all of the stories about adventure and hunting and military endeavors. Those are all from Mama's family. The Roosevelts were mercantilists. They were making money. They were for the Union in the Civil War, but they avoided service. They paid substitutes. Theodore Roosevelt, his sister, wrote, the reason TR went to war at the age of 39 is because he thought the only black mark on his father, Theodore Roosevelt, was that he had not gone to war. But the big heart, in fact, they called his father Great Heart from Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. That great heart manifested itself when he and others in New York City came up with the idea, then got it through Congress, endorsed by the president, the Allotment Commission, whereby a soldier or sailor could send a portion of their pay home for the support of spouse and children. That was the service that TR's father did. And this life of service, fast forward to, the situation in the Adirondacks and rushing to Buffalo to take the oath of office, but he does so because he's been up climbing in the mountains in a borrowed suit. There's no Bible at hand. When he has his own inauguration in his own right, no longer an accidental president, elected by the largest electoral and popular vote plurality in our history, and his service in the presidency is from September 1901 until March of 1909. He has his own suit. He has his family Bible, I think inspired by his father, who taught the Roosevelt children, Teddy and his three siblings, Bible devotion every morning. James 1:22. Be thou not only hearers of the word, but doers of the word also. Theodore Roosevelt's father, who died at the age of 46, lived a life of service, in part because he was the youngest of 5 Roosevelt brothers involved in the business, Roosevelt and Sons, so he did the philanthropic work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just rewatched the Ken Burns Roosevelt miniseries on PBS. I've read the Edmund Morris books. What comes through for me especially is his very strong moral compass and duty and obligation, and using any office he was in, whether he was a New York State Assemblyman, he was governor, he had held positions in the cabinet, that he always did the right thing to fulfill his duty and obligation in those various roles that he had. It's super impressive.
You might know, Jane, he's on Mount Rushmore, according to the artist and his friend Gutzon Borglum, for the square deal.
Yes.
Which was what everyone was entitled to. They were due no less, and they should expect no more than fair treatment and a square deal. He was so firm in his own moral sense of understanding the world, what might be right and wrong, always seeking counsel from advisors. But he once famously said, I don't know what the American people think. I only know what they ought to think. Confident in his views.
That's a great quote. Let's talk about his connection to the Adirondacks. So he was patrician. He was an early adult at the time when, the great camps were being established. He certainly came up here where there was the Lake Placid Club, I think, Tahawas, other places. What do you think was so attractive? And this might be even a layup question for you, but what do you think really drew him to this region?
Well, first, his parents. And isn't it interesting that for a lot of people, it's being today in the backseat of the family car when your parents or grandparents bring you up to the camp, or your first tour through the Adirondacks if the family doesn't have a camp. The Roosevelt family, in that living in a very hot, and think of 1 million people, 500,000 horses, and horrible sanitation in New York. You got out of town in summer.
Yep.
And when they were little, Teddy being the second oldest of 4 children, it was northern New Jersey or the beach at Long Branch or out to Long Island or along the Hudson. Then eventually it's later when he's a teenager that they get out to Paul Smith's and to St. Regis. And at St. Regis, there was a camp or a lodge there. And those are the early trips. During college, he comes back, and because he's an ornithologist and does taxidermy with the birds, he brings his friend Henry Minot, and in 2 summers, they paddle around Tupper Lake and Saranac Lake. And the first thing that Theodore Roosevelt ever publishes is a pamphlet on the summer birds of Franklin County, New York, co-written by Henry Minot. He goes on to publish over 30 books. Sometimes we call it 40, because there's compilations of his essays. And I love the fact that his seminal experience as a published writer is in the Adirondacks. Then later, through his General Assembly days, he gets to know the people of the Capital Region who further introduce him. The Prines at Santanoni, that wonderful historic property, become friends. Teddy visits out there as well as Governor. Famous picture of Teddy climbing a tree at Santanoni to get a closer look at a porcupine. So these great adventures and an invitation then, of course, to vacation there that just happens to coincide with the tragedy that occurred with the shooting of McKinley on September 6th and his death 8 days later on September 14th. In between, Theodore Roosevelt, after doing everything he could in Buffalo, heads up to the Adirondacks and thus puts the region on the front page of every major paper in the world, has the scenario, the occurrences, what's happening in the Adirondacks is front page news all over the world.
So when McKinley is first shot, the Roosevelts, the whole family were together in Vermont vacationing, and Teddy immediately rushes to Buffalo, correct?
Some of the family is touring with Theodore. Others are elsewhere and will congregate up via the train station at North Creek. He is at Isle La Motte and just about to make a speech at Lieutenant Governor Fisk's house. And the only phone on the island rings. It's the news from Buffalo that McKinley's been shot. So TR takes a steamer to Burlington and then by train gets out to Buffalo, arrives later that day on the 6th. And by the 11th, the physicians from McKinley have assured the vice president and the cabinet assembled there that McKinley would recuperate from his wounds. TR is encouraged to meet his family that's waiting for him in the Adirondacks by now. Mrs. Roosevelt is making the rounds of visiting some of the other ladies, including Mrs. Prine at Santanoni. The children are playing up at Tahaz, the McNaughton cottage. And unfortunately for President McKinley, the two physicians treating his wounds were both obstetricians, neither of whom had ever treated a gunshot wound.
Oh, my gosh.
Right? Can you imagine such a thing today? And word comes, TR is being hosted. His forester, Gifford Pinchot, with the artist Lafarge, had climbed Mount Marcy, the highest point in New York, in February of that same year through a blizzard. TR wasn't going to be bested by that Yale Bulldog Pinchot in anything, so he decides to go climb Mount Marcy. He doesn't hunt on this trip. His son, Ted Jr., gets his first buck during this trip. And I want to say it might have been, I'm going to misstate if I say what lodge Ted Jr. was at, but it's all of one in that region. The experience Theodore Roosevelt had then ascending Mount Marcy with the French Quebecois guide, Noah Lacasse, word coming at Lake Tier the Clouds that McKinley was failing in Buffalo. And then we begin what's become remembered as Theodore Roosevelt's midnight ride to the presidency. Riding through the night of the evening of the 13th and the 14th and rain and mud and corduroy roads, he and the last driver, Mike Cronin, make the trip from Aiden's Lair, which your Adirondacks visitors will see at on 28N between Newcomb and Minerva. They make the run in the dark, in the mud, in the rain, faster than any sportsman in subsequent years could make the trip in dry conditions during the daytime.
Right.
That was the rush.
Exactly. And I also want, for our listeners who may not realize this, at this time in the Adirondacks, it's very hard beyond North Creek and those terminals, which are really kind of in the southern Adirondacks. It's hours to go anywhere else. So it's not like he's hopping on the I-87 at exit 28 and speeding down to Albany to hop on the Amtrak. He has to change horses multiple times. He rides, through the night. And he, as I understand it too, from this fantastic book that Joe sent me called Theodore Roosevelt's Night Ride to the Presidency, he's at Lake Tier. He sees a guide approaching them, and he knows immediately it's not good news. He knows something's amiss. So they quickly speed down Marcy to the lodge where they're staying, and even that they do in record time.
We must reference the wonderful author of that book, Eloise Cronin Murphy. She's actually the daughter of Michael Cronin, who is the last man to drive. The original guide who comes up and rushes up to bring the notice to Theodore Roosevelt, was rather amazed at the lack of alacrity with which Theodore Roosevelt responded. He explained himself later. He wasn't going to rush to Buffalo if he couldn't be of any practical use to the people there. He'd already spent days. He certainly made his way back to the McNaughton cottage, but even there kind of took his time, cleaned up, even had a little supper, rested. But then it was emphasized to him that we're continuing to get notices from your secretary who is waiting at North Creek that you're urgently needed in Buffalo. So they then begin that midnight ride.
Am I correct in thinking that he had faced some criticism, as everyone, second guesses everything, that he was sort of an opportunist rushing off to Buffalo the first time. So this time he wanted to be a little more cautious. Is that true?
So remember, now it might be hard for us to imagine this today, but in TR's era, the news outlets could be very partisan.
Yes.
So any opportunity to, attack your political opponents was, especially in those, remember the muckraking and yellow journalism days. And so I recall seeing it, and I have a friend who's asked me to find it. And in this 20-year experience, you might imagine the books and the pamphlets and the folders. There is a cartoon in a Democratic newspaper of the vice president standing, and he's characterized as a vulture, standing over the prostrate body of McKinley. And that was such a strong image of the criticism of, oh, look at that young, opportunistic Theodore Roosevelt, just can't wait for the president to die. No good deed, everything can be misinterpreted.
Yeah.
I think being away and letting those who could be most helpful, I think that felt like the right thing to do for him, and not rushing back if, again, it wasn't really warranted and needed. It makes then for an interesting timeline. If Theodore Roosevelt had actually hastened during that evening that he was away, he still wouldn't have made it to Buffalo in time to say goodbye to a McKinley that had already drifted off into his last moments.
They impress upon him that he needs to go, and he starts out, and it's dark. And how far does he get before he has to change horses again?
Oh, it's really good. I should have brought that source with me because she lays it out so geographically well. But it's fun to have been in the Adirondacks so many times and been involved in the programs of the Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt weekend. So he goes from the McNaughton cottage, which, by the way, congratulations with the Open Space Institute, with others that have been involved. That cottage has actually been restored. And I think there was a big event this last year to acknowledge the fact that the exterior and perhaps even portions of the interior had been restored. That's the home in which the Roosevelt family lived. It was the caretaker, the general manager's house of the Tahawus Hunting Club. He makes it from there, which we know as the Upper Works, down to what's currently the clubhouse of the Tahawus Club, and that's the Lower Works. And the number of miles and how long they took it, I don't have that at hand, but that's the first ride. It's taken with one horse that has hauled lumber through the woods all day. So that's a plodding sort of course that's taken down, and that's the upper reaches, right? So that's the most difficult roads. They're the least maintained or least developed roads. Then from the Lower Works to Aiden's Lair. And again, Aiden's Lair is that sort of spot on the road between Minerva and Newcomb. And then it's there where at about, I want to say it's about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, that they switch horses again. Mike Cronin's got 2 Black Morgans on a speedy coach. And he very often has made this trip. The horses knew the trip from the station in North Creek to Aiden's Lair because they'd gone to pick up guests so often. So there was some confidence there. At one point during the ride, Cronin pulls back on the reins because he feels like they might slide over the edge of the cliff. And TR says, "No, if you're not scared, I'm not. Faster, faster." And what an amazing pell-mell ride that must have been. And then culminating right before you cross the river again at North Creek, Theodore Roosevelt has Mike Cronin stop to give the horses a chance to blow, but also a chance for him to straighten his tie and shake off his duster, for there might be, press and important people waiting at the train station. The locals say that when they thundered across the wooden slats of the bridge, that's when they knew they'd been waiting for hours and hours for the vice president to arrive. He does so. His secretary is waiting for him there with the telegram from John Hay. It's 6:00 in the morning right now, and the telegram says that at 2:15 in the morning, President McKinley had died. So even if TR had hastened down the hill earlier, he still would have probably at best been in the capital region, transferring trains and heading out west.
When Cronin picked him up, did he know that McKinley had already passed?
It's interesting. The telling by his daughter says that Cronin knew, and that Cronin had everyone else, including sportsmen that were trying to pay him large amounts of money to allow them to be the person to ride the horses down. Nobody needed to ride them down but Mike Cronin. And so according to Cronin's telling of it, and Eloise Cronin Murphy's telling of it, he knew and did not tell the president. They were friends, but maybe he didn't feel it was his place.
Yeah.
In a time when we still had a sense of place, but very often I think Theodore Roosevelt dispensed with that sense of place and standing. So I don't know. I put a question mark on that one.
You can drive down 28N now and actually see Aiden's Lair is still there, or a building is still there on that site.
What's interesting is the building that you see is on the north side of 28N. The original Aiden's Lair was actually on the south side.
Ah, okay.
And if you delve into those woods a little bit, you'll find a little bit of the remnants of the original Aiden's Lair. I've never delved into those woods.
Listener, if you do take that route, there's actually signage, state signage, that it's called the Marcy Trail, I think.
Okay, or the Roosevelt Marcy Highway?
Yes,
right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
got Teddy's name first in there for some reason.
Yeah.
Marcy Roosevelt? No, it's Roosevelt Marcy, I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And in fact, the sign has an illustration of, it looks like Teddy with the mustache and a hat, the duster hat.
I think it might just be the pince nez.
Okay.
It might be the glasses and the mustache, I think.
You probably have seen it many more times than I have. I just drove by there a couple weeks ago and pointed it out to friends who were visiting. But there is that blue and gold, New York State marker right there at that building. So
right. But I've got one even better for you that you probably know. And that is that on the north side of 28N, again, between Newcomb and Minerva, but interestingly, about 300 yards into Newcomb Township is a marker with a brass plaque and plantings, and it's a big boulder that the brass markers put on. It's set aside. It's a good 12 or 15 feet off of the highway. You can park on the side of the road and read the plaque. It says, "This is where Theodore Roosevelt was at 2:15 in the morning when President McKinley died." My interpretation is that the city fathers of Newcomb Township met before the city fathers of Minerva Township could meet in order to say that and allocate funds and get a project started. Others have said, actually, and people from Minerva said, somebody did calculate the time of departure to the time of arrival, and then they evenly split the times, the pace, if it was 4 miles an hour, and they too have kind of said it was right there. But my comeback is you weren't riding at the same pace the whole time. The first part was slower. The last part was the fastest. So maybe there's a master's thesis in there for a mathematician who likes history.
Steve, do you know where that boulder is? Is it in Newcomb, did you say, Joe?
Remember, you've got townships, right?
Right.
So there's a great deal of rural area between the little cities or towns themselves within the township. It is definitely in Newcomb Township.
I don't think I've stopped at that.
You've seen it, Joe, right?
I'll send you guys a picture. Yeah.
Well, I'll just stop there next time I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep an eye out. I've driven that many times.
Oh, terrific.
When you're doing your performance, when you're reprising Teddy, do you retrace that moment? Do you talk about that moment when he found out he was now the president?
It's interesting. Great question, because there are about 500 really interesting Theodore Roosevelt stories in chapter 1. So sometimes I tell it, sometimes I don't. It's interesting how it comes up and what parts of the story get told and what don't. the first time, Jane and Steve, that I ever sort of workshopped the Teddy Roosevelt show, it was in our living room in Fairdale, Illinois. We had renovated a turn-of-the-century church into our home. So the living room was 40 by 60, and I had 120 of my family and friends, and I printed out big, bold words for my outline, and I taped it up on the inside of some posts that held up a loft that we'd built. And I realized that 2 hours into the performance, TR was 25 years old and a cowboy in the Badlands. And editing is the key when trying to tell Teddy Roosevelt's story. So I must admit, I don't get to tell the ascendancy to the presidency story and the important things that bookend that as much as I otherwise might. Of course, next September, telling that story from Isle Lamont and Buffalo and Newcomb and North Creek, that's going to be the 125th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Of this time when this region played such a pivotal role in American history. So I'm really looking forward to the plans that we're making right now to make that such a big deal that we'll actually finish our celebrations and commemorations in the Adirondacks, and then we'll take the train to Buffalo.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
And the Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural National Historic Site on Delaware Avenue in Buffalo is the only national park site in Western New York. When we commemorate September 14th there, we not only recreate the inauguration, but we also, a federal judge declares the entire site a federal courthouse, and we hold a naturalization ceremony. 20 or 30 new American citizens take the oath of naturalization.
I love that.
At that site where Theodore Roosevelt took the oath to be our president. So it's going to be a wonderful experience next summer. So I'd ask your listeners to check out the Town of Newcomb website. Will be an important one to visit. I think visit North Creek. We're going to do something down at their wonderful Tannery Pond during that weekend next year. And, of course, the Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural National Historic Site, which bragged the other day because they're run by a 501c3 with a memorandum of understanding with the National Park. They're actually open during this federal government shutdown. You can actually still go to the Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural Site in Buffalo.
That's great reminders. I'm going to put all of that in our show notes, listeners, so you can click right through from our website. And as long as we're talking about websites, how can people get more information about you?
Oh, terrific. Thank you. I'm at teddyrooseveltshow.com, and it's the nature of websites that even with my website people, they have a hard time keeping up with me. So I don't think the schedule for the year ahead is yet fully posted, but I'll be next summer here in Medora, North Dakota, and I would advise your listeners to visit Medora.com to get a wonderful connection with what's being done out here in Medora, where we're the gateway to Theodore Roosevelt National Park since 1947. And in 2026, for our America 250 celebration, July 4th, that whole first week of July, we'll be celebrating the grand opening of a $400 million Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum in Medora, North Dakota, a town of 150 people. And it's
That's
beautiful.
Cool.
It's gorgeous. The Badlands, Theodore Roosevelt said it was here that the romance of his life began. We know that he came out here immediately after the death of his wife and mother. At least later that summer, he finished his obligations in the General Assembly in Albany first. But he spent 3 years as a cattle rancher and cowboy here, and it made a big difference in his life. The Badlands are a beautiful part of our country. And next summer, in the festivities of celebrating our republic, we'll also expect that we have a presidential visit, the visits of the former presidents that are still living, and a celebration of our own little part of history out here in western North Dakota.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that his decision to go west, listeners, if you don't know the story, Teddy's wife died after giving birth to their first child as a result of an undetected kidney issue, and his mother had typhoid and died several hours later. So he lost two of the brightest lights in his life on the same day. I can't imagine. It's unimaginable how the impact that must have had on him.
Wife and mother on the same day, February 14th, 1884. He himself is but 25 years old. 6 years prior, when he's a sophomore at Harvard, his father dies. And I actually believe, while we emphasize that he came here and he healed and he rebuilt himself and he remarried and he got back in the arena, my own sense is, if not for the previous experience of 5 extended trips to the Northwoods of Maine, where he healed from the death of his father, and he had, back to your question about why the Adirondacks, the fresh air, the strenuous life, the showing that you've got grit and, as he said, the right stuff in you. He healed in the Northwoods of Maine along the Penobscot and at Katahdin, 6 years prior to having to have a similar experience, a double blow 6 years later. His story is so inspirational, in great part for the fact that even though he came from wealth and privilege, he got knocked down. Each and every one of our lives has tragedy and hardship and defeat. And for TR, it wasn't having been defeated, it's getting back up again. He said, it's not having been in the dark place. We've all been in the dark place. The thing is to get out of the dark place and into the light.
Yeah, his quote about the man in the arena is one of my favorite and most inspiring quotes. I want to touch on one aspect of him because, as you said, we could probably devote a month worth of podcasts to the life of Teddy Roosevelt.
Well, I'll come back, Jane, if you'll have me.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you.
Definitely will.
Especially, I didn't realize it was the 125th anniversary of the ride to the presidency. So you already gave me a great idea, Joe. So I can't wait for it. TR is often referred to as the conservation president. Share and tell our listeners a little bit more, what did he actually accomplish in that realm?
So your listeners, like a lot of Americans, might first think of the national parks. And Theodore Roosevelt is associated with that, but it took an act of Congress to name a national park. So he doubled the number from 5 to 10. And amongst the latter that he helped to create with Congress was Crater Lake in Oregon, Mesa Verde in Colorado, Wind Cave in South Dakota. 150 million acres, however, of national forests. And that's because he had the power under the Forest Reserve Act to do that without the approval of Congress. They'd already given him approval to make best decisions about naming national forests.
And that's 100 million?
150 million acres.
Wow. And
it was the declaration, the numbers work out so beautifully. He either named or expanded 150 national forests. When he became president, there were 50 million acres. When he finished, 200 million acres. But remember, Gifford Pinchot is national forester, and they created the United States Forest Service in the Ag Department during his administration. 18 national monuments. For Pinchot and Roosevelt, conservation, as opposed to John Muir and preservation, conservation meant using the natural resources. Harvest the lumber, mine the minerals, dam the rivers, create hydroelectricity, irrigate lands, but do so in a way that's responsible for future generations. Whereas Muir would have said, leave it alone, leave it as it is. Well, Teddy famously said, leave it as it is at the Grand Canyon. Congress wouldn't name it a national park, but based on the 1906 Monuments and Antiquities Act passed during his administration, he could, by executive order, name national monuments. So Devil's Tower, Mount Olympus in Washington, the Petrified Forest in Arizona, and when Congress wouldn't name the Grand Canyon a national park, Teddy named it a national monument. So he had a lot of opponents in Congress. Speaker of the House, Joe Cannon, said, not 1 cent for scenery. We who live in his legacy know that those natural places, the parks, the forests, that's not scenery. Those are playgrounds and wild places meant for our restoration, as it says above Roosevelt Arch at Gardner, Montana, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. That's also the natural resources. He said it was the right and duty of every generation to use the natural resources, especially the public lands, and to do so in a way that leaves them in better condition for future generations and not in worse. But quickly, Jane, to go on, it's conservation, and that's the Reclamation Act, and that's the damming of the rivers and the irrigation. But really for him, it was the Panama Canal. The ability to move our Navy from one ocean to the other and cut to 1/3 the amount of time necessary to defend those coasts at a time when you didn't know if you were going to go to war with Asia or Europe over some controversy. He got the Nobel Peace Prize for settling the Russo-Japanese War with the Treaty of Portsmouth. The Pure Food and Drug Act, federal meat inspection, railroad regulation. His legislative accomplishments are amazing. And then you look at culturally, we founded the NCAA and changed the rules of football because of Teddy Roosevelt. So his stories are just so impactful across modern America. And of course, so much of what he dealt with, immigration, labor relations, wealth disparity, race relations, if I didn't mention that, those are the issues today. And so we're going to be able to, on the 125th anniversary of his presidency, good Lord willing and the creek don't rise, from next September then through 2034, my responsibility as a public historian is going to be kind of making TR relevant again. We don't just need more cowbell, we need more Teddy Roosevelt.
Right.
And so I'm glad to help bring the supply, and I train other Teddy Roosevelts around the country and send them out to do Teddy Roosevelt around the country. So
that's very cool.
Yeah. I'll look forward maybe to another visit to share that with you too.
Yeah. Couple more things on your performance. Do you stay in character completely, or does Joe ever peek through?
So it's interesting. The tradition of Chautauqua in the modern sense is that a historical performer will first perform in character, then take questions in character, and then come out of character and take questions as the performer, the academic, the researcher. I do both. I have also sometimes I'll stay in character from start to finish, because why pop the balloon? If theater is the willing suspension of disbelief, and if, as many audience members tell me afterwards, I think you really are Teddy Roosevelt, well then, I'll probably not, come out of character as Joe. But again, kind of depends upon the audience and the program and what we're trying to achieve.
That's great. I know we're audio and not video, but we will have pictures of Joe, and he looks like Teddy Roosevelt.
He does.
I've had my glasses
there
off.
You go. That's
I've had my glasses off, and I do have the pince-nez, but
I don't think you've had any cosmetic alterations.
No.
It's just happened that way. Which I
told
so
you were
cool.
a tough interviewer. Nobody's ever brought that up before, but I'll share with you. Your listeners can't see, but I did have a wonderful child in the schools of Belle Fourche, South Dakota, where Theodore Roosevelt's dear friend Seth Bullock. And if your listeners have ever watched the TV show Deadwood, there's a horribly misrepresented character of Seth Bullock. He was a wonderful man, dear friend of Theodore Roosevelt's, there at his tennis cabinet meeting. The first posthumous memorial ever to TR was built by Seth Bullock and the South Dakota Pioneers down by Deadwood. But a little boy who understood from an earlier answer that I was 167, he said, if you're 167, how come your hair is still brown? And because I had a bunch of elementary school teachers on the walls when they were junior high teachers, I looked around and the ladies were all of a certain age. And I just shared, I said, young man, your teachers might be able to understand this. If I didn't dare dye my hair, I'd be portraying a fat Mark Twain. And all the I don't know that the kids understood, but the teachers all understood. And now Tom Selleck, at the age of 70, is portraying Commissioner Reagan on Blue Bloods. And he's always quoting Teddy Roosevelt. And he's got a Teddy Roosevelt picture on his wall because Teddy was the police commissioner of New York. And I'll be darned if Tom Selleck's mustache doesn't look like the mustache of a 20-year-old. There's not a bit of pepper in that, or a bit of salt in that pepper. And so I'm in the dye shop every now and then.
That's great. What do you hope your audiences take away after seeing you portray Teddy? Encouragement.
I hope they're encouraged to face the adversities that are in their lives, because most of those audiences are going to get this thread of, I was the little boy with asthma who built my body. I was the young man who had these tragedies in my life that I overcame. Even in politics, Theodore Roosevelt ran for mayor as a young man, came in third out of 3. That's last place. So I'll just say that I hope that my audience members, young and old, get some encouragement for the challenges ahead. Life isn't easy. And even then, because I'm a hippie-comedian son, if all we did was have some laughter and lightheartedness, we need that too. That's soul food. So I'm happy to kind of mix we go through pathos and we go through inspiration, but we have a good time doing it. There's some laughter along the way, because Theodore Roosevelt, I think, I miss this. He was a president who had a wonderful sense of self-deprecating humor, was able to take a joke and give a joke, and life was a frolic. And so it's fun to just convey that energy and optimism and happiness. The joy of living in the glory of work was one of TR's phrases.
Joe, this has been so great. I've continued to learn more and more about TR, and I have learned more in this last 40 minutes or so, so we appreciate it. And I definitely will have to figure out a time that works for your schedule to come back around the 125th.
We'll have to go watch it, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, come be a part of it.
We'll drag our dad up.
Please, that'd be great.
Yeah. Our dad is a social studies teacher, very active in local politics.
Wonderful.
Retired social studies teacher. He's not teaching anymore.
Yeah.
And also loves the stories of the presidents. He just finished Ron Chernow's Grant.
Terrific.
And has read those books as well.
I will look forward to entertaining Mr. Ackerman. I'm sure that'll just be terrific.
That's great. All right. So before we release you into the wild, we always like to end with a question that really is meant to give our listeners new insight into the Adirondacks. And we know you don't live here, but you have been here many times. And you know that the Adirondacks are full of hidden gems. And when I say hidden gems, it can be everything from a delicious frozen custard stand to a great paddle to we love the Star Trek Museum in Ticonderoga. If you're a fan of Star Trek, it's really a cool experience. The historic great camps and the other historic places here. So when you come to Newcomb for TR weekend, is there a place that you return to frequently or you look forward to visiting again? Or even if you've only been once, that was really a surprise and a delight for you?
I mentioned earlier the McNaughton Cottage. It's up at the Upper Works at what had been called originally Adirondack. There was a little village up there called Adirondack. It's related to the old lead mining and the mining that was done up in that immediate vicinity. Eventually became this large hunt club. And that McNaughton Cottage, where the Roosevelts stayed, there's 2 points on this line. One is the McNaughton Cottage. And then if you go up on the trails that go to the north, and they're open in conjunction with all of the people that are involved in helping to protect and preserve the Adirondacks, but especially the Open Space Institute, you register as a hiker. I like to hike from the McNaughton Cottage through the flowlands to Lake Colden.
Yes.
Where there had been a camp and a camp house. On September 12th, 1901, the Roosevelt family and others from the Tahaz Club go to Lake Colden. They camp, they tell stories. It rains all night. And in the cold, chilly morning, most of the party returns to the McNaughton Cottage in Tahaz. Noah Lacasse and Theodore Roosevelt, Mr. McNaughton, and 2 other guests at the Tahaz Club, they make the ascent of Mount Marcy. Next September, we're going to recreate that hike. I've made that hike with someone I hope you've had as a guest from Lake Placid. Jeff Gronauer is one of the leading conservationists in this country. His father was the golf pro at the Lake Placid Country Club and previously at the Sleepy Hollow Country Club down the river. But Jeff took me up, and to actually be at the apex of Mount Marcy and the cloud splitter, when Teddy climbed it, they say it lived up to its nickname of the cloud splitter because the clouds and the fog all dissipated, and he could see the fresh waters and the high peaks 360 degrees around. And I was able to stand at that same spot, able to come down to Lake Tier of the Clouds, able to retrace the steps that he took to and from the apex on those dates, returning on the evening of the 13th to the McNaughton Cottage, making the race down in the morning of the 14th. To me, it's magical. To me, it's part of what's in my veins when I perform as Theodore Roosevelt, splashing about the Hudson in its shallows behind the McNaughton Cottage to drink water from Lake Tier of the Clouds, cupped in my hands. I wish for others that experience. I will put a caveat on. We had a long, hard hike to the top of Tahaz. It kicked me in the rump. And I scrambled up the last bear face pretty quickly. But when I got there were 4 what I would then have called elderly gentlemen standing at the top looking fresh as daisies. And I took a bit of umbrage until I learned there's a much shorter path up from Lake Placid than on the north side. You can get up there a lot quicker and easier. But anyone that would like to relive Theodore Roosevelt's strenuous hike up Mount Marcy, start at the McNaughton Cottage, go up through the Flowlands and Lake Colden, and make your way up that trail. I look forward to doing it next summer.
That's a great story. And you referenced this, but listeners, Lake Tier is the source of the Hudson River. And so it's very cool to see Lake Tier of the clouds and then the trickle that comes down from that. And then to compare that to what you see when you're on the west side of Manhattan is really pretty amazing. We've had a bunch of people here this summer from all over the country. And at one point we were crossing the Hudson at Riparius, which is not far from North Creek. And someone said to me, "Oh, I didn't know there were 2 Hudson Rivers in New York." And I just was like, there aren't. And we got out the map when I got home, but it was very cool. Joe, thank you so much for being on 80K Talks. This has been really one for the record books, and I'm definitely looking forward to having you on again.
Jane, thanks to you, to the engineer, your brother Steve, and thanks to your listeners. Thanks to everyone who helps to preserve the Adirondacks, a place where families and visitors, there's so much history, and there's such a bright future for the people of that region. I look forward to being back a great deal more in the future beyond our annual September visit. I look forward to doing a lot more in that region. Look forward to sharing that with your listeners.
And you know what, Joe? Thanks for sharing more about Medora. I definitely want to make my way out there. I lived in Kansas City in the Midwest for a number of years and enjoyed going to places I would never go otherwise, but I never made it to the Badlands. And so you've really inspired me to do that next year as well.
We'll roll the red carpet out for you. And Theodore Roosevelt, as a young man, wrote that the Badlands looked the way Edgar Allan Poe sounds.
I love that.
Ooh.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great?
Well, that's awesome.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
I got to ask you a quick question, Joe.
Steve, please.
And I know you got to get going.
It's okay.
So, our father, local politics.
What's Dad's name? First name?
B. Donald Ackerman.
B. Donald. Bertrand
B.
Donald.
Donald.
He went by B. His
Love
father's name was Bertrand, but he wasn't a junior, so he was by B. Donald.
Yeah.
And an avid political items collector. I'm curious, with your political background, and then do you have a collection of memorabilia?
It's interesting. I'd love to show you around the corner. I say I don't collect TR stuff, because if I did, I'd be living in the garage with my collection.
With your collection?
My wife tolerates the fact that I've become Teddy Roosevelt. Neither one of us saw this coming. I have books, and I love them. And for me, there are 2 smells of my childhood. One was my baseball glove. 3. The other was my books, and the other was Mrs. Carnavelli's kitchen next door. But the books are great. I do have challenge coins that military leaders and public officials like your dad would have given to me, mayors and that kind of thing. I guess what's been happening is I've been collecting experiences.
Very nice.
And I think what's part of neat about being with you guys even is to know that when a lady like Doris Kearns Goodwin says, "Your stories are amazing, you need to write these down," she's the 500th person that when they start hearing about the hippie comedian and the conservative kid, and then the adventures I've had around the world, the things that I've done here in the States, the gifts that audiences have given me in performances, it's a great adventure. And I do think it's very likely that I will take the time between now and 2034. I guess I know how I'm playing my fourth quarter. This is going to be a significant part of my fourth quarter. And it's one that, because I've invested and helped make Medora over the last 14 years that I've been here, I now am looking to that time. My wife is from Baltimore. They've got a place in the Thousand Islands. You and I know I could spend a summer in the Adirondacks and stay busy the whole time.
Sure.
I want to play the Remington Museum in Ogdensburg.
Yeah.
I want to play the Clayton Opera House that I've played before.
Yeah.
I want to come down and play, the theater down in Old Forge. So
the View Center. Right? Yeah.
I've met the director. He lives in Florida in the winter. I mean, I'm this close on a lot of things, but I haven't had to try. I'm booked 8 to 12 months out, and I'm just trying to answer the email and the phone calls.
Yeah.
I haven't even marketed. So, but I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you for making time for us.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
It would be really cool for you to do something with Santanoni too.
I know.
We had the Adirondack Architectural Heritage folks
You
on.
got this guy ready?
Yep.
See the Newcomb rides?
Yeah.
So I'm working with these guys. I didn't realize they are there all summer
Yes.
with their horse rides.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in San Antonio, I've really enjoyed meetings, the staff as they continue to change. There's the wonderful older gentleman who's been there for years, and we sit together and tell stories during Teddy Roosevelt days. But what I would like to, I look forward to when I come on your show and I talk about my book.
Yes.
There you go.
Right? And it'll definitely have a chapter in it about Teddy becoming president in the Adirondacks.
Steve, I was surprised you didn't bring up you lived in McDonough Hall at Plattsburgh. Is that the same McDonough?
Right next. That's the same McDonough. Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, the most significant event that occurred on September 11th.
Oh, correct.
Prior to the attack on the World Trade Center was the Battle of Plattsburgh. The victory at the Battle of Plattsburgh.
Terrific. 1814.
And I read that a whole naval episode was something that was very inspirational to Teddy. And then we didn't even talk about FDR. FDR modeled a lot of his political career off of what Teddy did. So, well, you've got to go.
Square deal, New Deal.
Real quick take on Ken Burns. 7-part series. And I realize why they do 7 parts. It's because you're going to miss one and you're going to have to buy the DVD back in the old days. But my audiences, they was standing room only for months after that aired. And I used to tell audiences that I lost interest after the 3rd night when I died. But Ken, because Ken is kind of like an uber progressive, Teddy's a racist imperialist, but he's a good guy. Franklin, he's kind of a cad, but he brings us through the Depression and wins the Second World War. Eleanor, the clouds part, the angels sing, the cherubims rejoice. Eleanor is the iconic. He's Ken Burns' favorite.
Yeah.
Hey, a lot of fun, guys. Got to go.
A lot of fun,
Thanks so much.
too.
Yep. Thank you.
You guys take care. All the best to your listeners. We'll see you in Medora, and we'll see you in Newcomb, September 2026.
We will.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
That was so much fun. I know I say that every episode, but I really loved that.
I did too. We've got to go next year.
Yes. The festival. Yeah. It's very cool. It's very cool. And Newcomb's a great spot. And that boulder he talked about, I think I saw that. I think it's next to that park where you can see the high peaks.
No.
All right. Well, I'm going to go find it.
Okay. I think I've seen it. I mean, there are a number of boulders in the Adirondacks that have plaques attached to them. I have to admit that was a way of putting up markers possibly before the state came up with the system of the blue and gold metal historic marker signs. But so you see them in various places. There's one actually on a boulder just off the Scroon River, right near the crossroads.
Oh, interesting.
There's a spring near there as well. I'll show it to you sometime.
Cool.
But be able to spin a yarn the way he's obviously capable of it was fun.
Yeah, I could have listened to him, for hours. And listener, we hope you enjoyed it as well.
Certainly.
Stories like today's remind us that the Adirondacks aren't just a place. They're a legacy carried forward by the people who live or visit and dream here. So if this episode moved you, please rate and review us so more listeners can discover these voices.
And email us. Tell us what we did wrong. Those are the ones we like the best.
Maybe you like them the best.
Because it's usually you.
And for more Adirondack stories and insights, as we suggest in every episode, visit adktaste.com. Subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a story or upcoming fun events and
happenings.
It's all happening. Or discover great places to eat or stay. So until we meet again, may the peaks inspire courage, the rivers stir wonder, and the Adirondack winds carry Roosevelt's spirit beside you. Thanks, listeners. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.